Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday, Bayou Blitz family. Happy Free Agency Wednesday, Bayou Blitz family. Yeah, that's right. This afternoon was officially the beginning of free agency. But in the laughable world of Roger Goodell, signings started happening unofficially on Monday, the quote unquote legal tampering period. That's
Which is
about
an
as big.
oxymoron.
I was going to say that's about as big of an oxymoron as I've ever heard. But such is life in the Goodell world. But the New Orleans Saints have been extremely busy since the legal tampering period began. And here to break it all down for you and then some are your Bayou Blitz co-host, myself, Bob Rose, himself, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, happy Wednesday to you.
You as well. It's been a little different than in years past for the Saints in free agency, at least to start, right? Like they're swinging big, they're swinging for the fences. It's a little bit more exciting than. I feel like there's a lot of people over the years that have pulled the meme out, and it's a guy with a stick like poking the fleur-de-lis, and it's just like do something. The Saints were off and running from the start. And a lot of times in this industry, and you know this, having reported some news over the years, and in some cases being the first to report the news in the local media, is that sometimes when there's smoke, there's no fire. And there is a large case of that when you're talking about free agency, when you're talking about smoke screens in the draft, right? That's really popular. But let's start with the big one, because where there was smoke, there was fire, right? And that was with the Saints going after the former Clemson running back and Jacksonville Jaguar, and that's Travis Etienne. And it was a guy that we talked about last week as, hey, how does he fit? And you and I both kind of said, well, he does a lot of the things that Kamara does. I don't really know how he fits if you're looking for that thunder and lightning type of role. Good between the tackles, better as a zone runner, has some reliable hands, does have big playability, right? The stat that got thrown around a ton is, Etienne had, I think it was 4 or 5 plays over 30 yards from scrimmage last year by himself. The Saints haven't had one since I don't even remember how long, but it's been a minute. So we love having that, but not exactly what I expected to see as like the first Saints news of free agency.
No, but we knew that they were going to. We knew that the Saints were going to have a new featured running back in 2026. Whether that came through the draft, like a couple of us were hoping for, with Jeremiah Love of Notre Dame. Etienne's name was certainly thrown around a lot. I was kind of hoping for, if they were going to go the free agency route. I personally preferred Kenneth Walker, who ended up signing with Kansas City for a little bit more per year than what Etienne is going to make with the Saints. But Etienne's contract makes him the 6th highest paid back in the NFL in terms of annual salary. Now we know not to pay a whole lot of attention to annual salary because things get moved around, restructured, backloaded contracts, etc. But I mean, Travis Etienne, he's only 20 something.
27.
Yeah, 27. You can't deny the production that he had with Jacksonville. 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons, another of over 900 yards. A good pass catcher, not as good as Kamara, but certainly, as you mentioned, Travis does a lot of the same things that Alvin does, but he's 4 years younger, less tread on the tires. Outside of his rookie year, he really hasn't had, knock on wood, hasn't had a whole lot of injuries. And while I agree with you, Brendan, that Etienne is he's a solid but not a great inside runner, and that he's a better in the zone blocking scheme. That is the scheme that the New Orleans Saints do prefer to run. So as I keep saying to people, when it comes to the draft or free agency selections, there's all these wannabe experts or self-proclaimed experts in free agency or the draft or personnel period. All this, the Saints should have signed this player, should have drafted that player. Look, if you're the head coach and you're running the numbers, maybe you make that call. Travis Etienne was the running back that Kellen Moore wanted for his system, and I applaud the Saints for being aggressive early on in free agency and really not letting anybody else snatch him up before they got a chance to.
Yeah, and a little bit of a reunion, right? A hometown signing. Reports where it was important for Etienne to be closer to home, which I guess, Jacksonville to New Orleans isn't that far. But he wanted to be closer to home. The opportunity came up to be in New Orleans. He's won some big games in the Superdome going back to his Clemson days with Trevor Lawrence. So, a lot of positive there. It is going to be interesting to see what they do with Kamara. There were some rumblings of could the Saints try to get out of the contract or move him or this or that. I wouldn't buy into any of that at this point. Still, time will tell. I could still envision it being a dual backfield. I think you and I, for the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, have said it's going to be better for the longevity of Alvin Kamara to be in a split backfield. And unfortunately, the Saints have not found that success. They tried it with Jamal Williams. It just didn't work. We'll see if they try to, kick the tires here and have a dual system with Travis Etienne. They also upgraded at a position which I think you could argue was one of the biggest, if not the biggest need on the offensive side of the ball, and that was at guard. They signed David Edwards from Buffalo. There were some connections made by some of our Twitter sleuths, if you will. The relationship between Edwards and now Saints assistant Will Clapp. I know there was a relationship there. There was a couple other, strings you could tie together if you really wanted to when it came with relationships between Edwards and members of the team or the staff. But you want to talk about, like, in my book, the home run signing to this point for the Saints, it's David Edwards. Because, look, you've already established, hopefully, your tackles of the future on both sides, right? Banks, Fawaga. That's why you draft them where they do. And they both have played well to this point in their career. Just like any young player, they've had their ups and downs, but mostly up. And you appreciate that. If Eric McCoy can stay healthy, big if, you still have a pretty solid center. Right guard it's a first-round pick, but we'll leave it at that. And now at left guard, a position that felt like a revolving door for the last 2 years because of injuries and some other things. And to be honest, I don't know if the Saints really ever filled the need there after Andrus Peat left. And I think the last couple years have shown people how good Andrus Peat was. Right, I do think he got a lot of unnecessary hate. That's a different conversation for a different show at a different time. But Edwards fills a major need, a guy that is strong in the run game, and also a guy that is probably going to appreciate not having to block for a quarterback like Josh Allen. And what I mean by that is sometimes the stats get skewed for offensive linemen because Josh Allen extends plays for about a minute longer than they need to be. And that's not a bad thing. It's really fun to watch. I really enjoy it.
It's not always a bad thing, right?
It's not always a bad thing. It's very entertaining to watch, but I'm sure those offensive linemen are like, damn it, Josh, I just got hit for giving up another sack because you didn't throw the ball away 30 seconds ago. But Edwards is going to have a big role on this team and fills just such a giant need. So while some people point towards the quote-unquote sexy signings, getting those skill position players, I love this. I think it's the best free agent pickup for the Saints to this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, like you said, we've been talking about that position, the interior offensive line in general, being the biggest weakness on this team, not just last year, but the last few years. So going into free agency, I felt pretty strongly that the Saints were going to make a quick and decisive move, to shore up one of those spots, and they did exactly that. Edwards, the numbers themselves are a little bit eye popping. 4 years, 61 million, a hefty signing bonus. But that's one of those backloaded contracts. He's only going to count. He's going to count under 7 million against the salary cap this year. Now let's hope he plays well, because those cap numbers escalate to 20 and 21 million the next couple of years. That, as we know, that already makes him a prime structure for or a prime candidate to restructure next year to create more salary cap space. And
what, the Saints have never done that ever, Bob. What are you talking about?
Well, if they choose to do it once in a lifetime, right? Yeah. But the key with Edwards is there are no voided years built into this first contract, which means you have a whole lot of room for flexibility down the road. He'll turn 29 later this month. Theoretically, he's still in the prime of his career, and like you said, he was a fixture on the Buffalo Bills line. Before that, he was a fixture on the LA Rams line, including a 17-game starter for that Rams team that won the Super Bowl a few years ago. Edwards is experienced in a few different systems. He's going to be the starter at left guard immediately, and I think that's only going to make the left tackle Kelvin Banks that much better. And Banks, for most of this past season, played at a Pro Bowl level as it was. I think the Saints are going to be a left-handed team, particularly when it comes to running the football. Tyler Shuck, between the additions of ATN and now Edwards up front to protect him, Tyler Shuck might be the happiest man in America, not named Daniel Jones. If you saw that ludicrous contract that the Indianapolis Dolts gave to Jones. But outside of Daniel Jones, Tyler Shuck has to be the happiest man on the planet right now. And like you said in our phone call earlier, the Saints offense got instantly better with those two signings, along with another one that a lot of people didn't see coming.
Instantly, overnight, on paper, this went from an offense with a lot of question marks to an offense that had a lot of bona fide experience and a solidified threat at a lot of spots as well, which I can appreciate. I guess we'll stick with the offense before we get to some other spots. I do want to shout out Mark. Thanks for tuning in with us. Calvin, thanks for tuning in with us. We'll get to that last comment, Calvin, I promise, because it made me chuckle when I saw it. So offensively, Noah Fant. Wow. Did not see that one coming. Very good signing. I think it'll go down as an underrated signing. Look, Noah Fant's been a guy that I think has been on both of our radars for a while now, as a guy that could fill a lot of different needs for the Saints. Does it put pressure on Juwan Johnson? Yes, a little bit.
A little.
But not tremendous. And I do want to talk about that a little bit, because I think that is the immediate thought for a lot of people is, oh, what does that mean for Juwan Johnson? To where it's like, no, it's more of a Foster Moreau replacement with more upside. A lot more upside.
Yeah, right? And I got to admit, I did not have Noah Fant on my bingo card, which I'm ashamed to admit, because even in my tight end, my free agency tight end target article, I didn't even have Fant listed in there. And I'm ashamed of myself, because I have been a Noah Fant fan since his days with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Was a big fan of his coming into the 2019 draft. Have been a big fan of his since, and was even calling for the Saints to sign him in free agency last offseason. I did actually have the Saints getting a tight end. My bingo card had Dallas Goedert because of the connection with Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier. But Fant is actually a better blocker than Goddard.
Mhm.
You compared him to Foster Moreau as far as the role that he's going to fill, but make no mistake, Noah Fant is heads and shoulders a better receiver than what Foster Moreau has. He's
Mhm.
he's a better receiving tight end than the Saints have had at that second tight end spot, probably since the mid 2000 teens days of the couple of years with Jimmy Graham and Ben Watson. And that's what kind of tandem that I think that Johnson and Fant have the potential to be. Now, neither one is Jimmy Graham. Make no mistake, I am not making comparisons there. But I think that the skill set that both of them bring to the field will allow Kellen Moore a lot more flexibility with his formations. You run a two tight end set. Either one of these guys can come off of the line. Fant is a better blocker than Johnson, but both of them can line up in the slot. Both of them are athletic enough to make plays down the field. And that just gives you a lot more flexibility than lining up Moreau or Jack Stahl or Josh Hill, some of the other number 2 tight ends that we have seen with the Saints over the years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I see a lot of 21 personnel in the future, which is fun. I see, it's funny you say Goddard because I think the Eagles in years past had ran a 2 tight end system pretty darn well.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the Ertz days, come to mind. And look, we're not talking about this being a tandem that's Gronk Hernandez, like one of the best tandems of all time on the field, but. You do have, to your point, Bob, you do have now the ability, like, I respect a lot of what Foster Moreau did in New
Yeah.
Orleans. I mean, obviously a great story when he came back to New Orleans and, his battle with cancer and all that stuff. All great. But he wasn't a guy that you lined up on the other side defensively and went, oh, this is a guy we got to really watch out for as a deep ball threat or, whatever the case may be. This does open it up. It also opens it up to being able to, split out either of them really wide and keeping one, inline tight end. So you can get creative. You can get fun with something like this. It's not a signing that I saw. Iowa's produced some really good NFL tight ends over the years. No offense on that list as well. And to your point, Bob, going back to 19 was a target we both had highlighted back when we were doing draft coverage in 19, a guy that has had some success in the league. And I expected better numbers from him a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of injuries on that team. And so I can't really blame him for not putting up those numbers. So I don't want someone to look back at his statistics from a year ago and be like, oh, why are we talking a guy up who only did this, this, and this? Well, the situation on paper going into that season was a lot better for Noah Fant than it ended up being.
Yeah. And and I know I just want to throw this in there real quick before we flip to the defensive side. The signing of Fant actually had a domino effect. We mentioned Foster Moreau. Foster Moreau, congratulations to him. He signed today with the Houston Texans. Jack Stahl, earlier in the day, we mentioned him too, signed with the Cleveland Browns. So congratulations to Jack. Neither Moreau or Stahl were going to be in the Saints' plans as soon as Noah Fant reached that agreement. Neither of those moves should come as a surprise to anybody. And the other offensive loss, is Luke Fortner, who signed a deal with the Carolina Panthers. Luke. That's kind of a shot to the depth of the offensive line, which we acknowledge did not play well on the inside. But I thought when Eric McCoy went down, Luke Fortner was probably the best, was probably the team's best interior offensive lineman last year. Better than Dylan Radunz at guard, certainly better than Cesar Ruiz at guard or any of the other turnstiles, that they used. Fortner was at least serviceable for them, for most of the games that he played in. So the Saints are going to have to, address offensive line depth, probably later in free agency or later on in the draft. The starting 5 is pretty much set, even with the human turnstile wearing number 51 at right guard.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get to special teams before we get to defense, just because of Calvin's comment. Calvin just threw out there, we now have a punter that can punt over 30 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so true. So before we get into the signing itself, the Saints did move on from Kai Kroger. And they got a better pick for it as
Yeah.
well. So the Saints send Kai Kroger in a 7th to Houston. Houston sends back a 6th. And yeah, we're talking about day 3 picks, but I'm still sitting there going, how did they swing that?
Mm-hmm.
Because Kroger was, I remember seeing the stat at some point last year, 32 NFL teams, and Kroger ranked below 32nd in yards per punt.
Yep, 34th in net average. I think he was 31st in gross. One of the lowest inside the opposing 20 percentages in the league. Certainly like the bottom 3 at the very best, if not worse than that. And he was the 4th punter that the Saints had used in 5 years since the departure of Thomas Morstead. All of them, Blake Gillikin, Matthew Hayball, Lou Headley, and Kroger, all of them were rookies. So I do like what the Saints did here, and they went out, they got themselves an established veteran, and with one of the better gross punting averages in the NFL.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of punters get a 4-year, $18 million deal. But that's what the Saints were able to piece together. I also like, and I don't know if this is overrated or underrated, guy punted from inside most of last year up in Minnesota as well. You're going into a dome. I do think that that helps. But you had said it best, Bob. I mean, this is a team that it wasn't quite as bad as like those early 2010s at the kicking position, and we've played that game before. Can you name every kicker the Saints have had? Not quite that bad, but it was something where just about every year, to your point, 4 and 5 years, the Saints were looking for a new punter. This does give a sense of stability for a guy who has been pretty good over the last few years.
Yeah, and like you said, Ryan Wright, he punted over half the season in a dome, with his home games with the Vikings and then one game at Detroit. But he also had to punt at Green Bay. He had to punt at Chicago, in the cold, in the wind, in the conditions. I'd like to see some better accuracy inside the 20 from Wright, but he did have significantly better numbers than what Kroger did in that category last year. And he is certainly the type of guy that can flip the field position when you have to punt from deep inside your own territory, which is where, to Calvin's comment, which is where the Saints have especially struggled the most since Morstead left.
Absolutely. Defensively, we'll start with the lesser names. John Ridgway comes back. I actually think that's a good depth signing. Nothing super fancy there, no big numbers or anything, but Ridgway comes back after being with the Saints a year ago. Caden Ellis makes his return to New Orleans. What's funny is we talked last week about most likely things to happen, and I had that as the most likely.
You reunion.
Did. Of all the different reunions we could have, I said, I think Caden Ellis makes a lot of sense. And, well, it happened. I'll say this. From what I can recall during the Caden Ellis years, which aren't that far removed, right? 3 years in Atlanta for Caden, is he was spoken of very highly by the media, by the coaches, and most importantly by his teammates. Demario Davis had a hell of a quote about Ellis, calling him like one of the league's best kept secrets during his time in New Orleans. And that was prior to, his breakout year where I believe he had 7 sacks for the Saints before ultimately getting paid by the Atlanta Falcons. Makes a lot of sense. The Saints obviously had a need because losing DeMario to the Jets, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. But we talked about it last week, not feeling super comfortable with Warner and Stutzman. If those ended up being your guys that you did need to make a move, Ellis is athletic. Ellis can shoot right out of a cannon. It's going to be really hard to replace DeMario Davis, but there are some things that Ellis does that I like that are comparable to things that DeMario does. One of them is being a delayed blitzer.
Yeah, downhill.
And using his athleticism to the best of his abilities. I think that athleticism also covers some of the flaws in coverage, but he is a much better cover linebacker than Pete Warner, which is not a very high bar. But nonetheless, I do like the signing. I think it's decent value, about $11 million a year annually over the next 3. I think it made a lot of sense. I think we talked about it last week, and that it is going to be a reminder for people that just because he's coming back to New Orleans does not mean he's running the same system he did the first go round. And there may be a learning curve. But I also think this system might fit him better than the last system did, based off of his skill set and his play style. So I'm excited for the return of Ellis ultimately.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, given the choice between the two, I would take DeMario Davis back for another year in a heartbeat. That wasn't an option. But once DeMario did sign with the Jets, the Saints, again, they moved decisively to fill that need. And bring him back one of the better. Personally, I was hoping for a Quay Walker or a Nakobe Dean, a more athletic linebacker. But Ellis, terrific downhill speed, plays the run well, good pass rusher, a decent in zone coverage, certainly better than Warner, probably better than Stutzman. Still athletically limited in space. I don't like the athleticism that the Saints have in their linebacker room outside of Isaiah Stallberg right now, but I think that does get addressed in the draft. You do have a guy in Ellis with a high football IQ. He'll probably be wearing the green dot, as the defensive play caller. And we're going to see a lot more of Danny Stutzman. And the main rotation, even if they draft a linebacker high, I talked about this on Under the Dome last night, even if they draft a linebacker high, that rookie is going to need some time to get acclimated to the NFL and a new system, whereas Ellis has played in a few systems, certainly has experience. Warner, Stutzman have experience in this system. Your rotational 3 are going to be Caden Ellis, Danny Stutzman, Pete Warner, with Isaiah Stallberg sprinkled in on a situational basis, most likely as a blitzer, as a pass rusher. Like you said, Ellis, he's not DeMario Davis, but he's going to be good enough for this defense. And I would make the same argument that you did. He might be a better fit as an inside backer in Brandon Staley's defense than he was in Dennis Allen's defense, who asked so much of the linebacker position. Frankly, it took Caden Ellis a couple years to really get a foothold for it, his first stint in New Orleans. But once he did, he's played terrific football for the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm glad to see it back. I hope the reunion goes well.
Yeah. Let's talk about that departure, DeMario Davis. The writing was on the wall, and it has been on the wall for a while. I go back to Kay Adams' interview with DeMario Davis, where he said, he was employed by the NFL. And I think at that point, a lot of people realized that the breakup was more likely than getting back together. And am I surprised DeMario went to New York? Yes. I understand going back home, if you will, or the team that gave you your first opportunity. I understand the money that was thrown his way. And a 2-year deal that maybe gives him a little bit more security than some of the other offers he may have had. But New York? Like, there's not a Super Bowl contender that you would have taken a little bit of less money to go. And that's the direction I thought DeMario would go. I'm not criticizing his decision by any means. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. I do think that both DeMario, who's just such a well-spoken individual, and a guy that once his football career is over could go in a million different directions, whether it be like a motivational speaker, obviously heavily involved in the community and community outreach. I could definitely see him do something full time in that field. Such a high football IQ. If he really wanted to go to the broadcast booth, he could. But I see more community outreach and motivational speaking and that type of thing in his future personally. Posts a beautiful goodbye message to New Orleans online. I think it was wonderful of Gail Benson and the Saints to make a statement on how important DeMario has been, not just to the team, but the city over the last 8 years. So I tip my cap there because it's not always like that, as you know very well, Bob. It's not always like that when someone leaves the team prior to retirement, right? Decides to, go and chase the money or chase a Super Bowl ring or whatever the case may be. So I have to tip my cap to both parties. I think it was handled very well. It doesn't seem like there's any animosity or ill feelings either way, that it's just a business. That doesn't mean it hurts any less.
Right.
That's the guy that you were hoping that if the Saints were to ever, turn the ship around and get back on track and make a deep run, that DeMario would be there, that he deserves that opportunity. So it does hurt. It does hurt because that some of the teams that DeMario was on deserved an opportunity to play for the Lombardi. And that DeMario Davis single-handedly won the Saints some games over the years. Whether it be a big play himself or putting people in the position to make big plays. So it hurts. I understand it. It's a business. I don't understand why he went to New York. But that also now leaves Cam Jordan on the table, whose salary did void, or not void, his cap hit.
Dead money.
Thank you. Comes into play today, or has now officially come into play. So if he does come back to New Orleans, the Saints will be essentially paying him twice, which then leaves the question, is Cameron Jordan likely to come back or more likely to be out the door? I don't know.
I'm starting to feel like it's a goodbye for Cam Jordan too.
I am too. The longer it drags out, is the more I feel that way.
Yeah. I still think it's a possibility he's back in New Orleans, and I'm certainly rooting for that. Not just on the field, because Cam can still play, as he showed everybody last year. But off the field too. The New Orleans Saints and Cameron Jordan are synonymous with each other. And even if he plays his last couple years elsewhere, that's not going to change a whole lot. But it's gonna hurt. If it happens at all. Certainly if it happens right now. And if Cam does leave, that increases the need the Saints have for an edge rusher. I've said all along that even if Cam was back, I think that they draft an edge rusher, on day 1 or day 2 of the draft anyway. But if Cam leaves, it's almost a necessity that you have to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, and Calvin brings up a good point, saying if they end up paying Cam so much in dead money, you could always sign him back for a veteran minimum.
Right.
That does also depend on a couple factors. One, what is Cam Jordan's market?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of us have a clear understanding of what type of market he has. Two, if Cam were to come back at vet minimum, he's doing the Saints a solid.
Yeah.
Because I still do think he commands some money on the open market. I think you'd agree with me if Cameron Jordan has played his last down of football in a Saints uniform. I think that one hurts me more than DeMario. And the reason being is Cam has made it very clear from the jump he has never envisioned himself playing for another franchise. There's not a lot of guys that just stay with one franchise anymore, and this one seemed like the shoe-in to do it.
Yeah.
So as we both just said, the longer this drags out, I think I feel worse by the day that they're not going to come to an agreement. That one would hurt. And Cam has been there for the highs and the lows.
Mm-hmm.
Almost the highest of highs, a few years before, or a few years after, rather, the Super Bowl. But, he was there in 11 for the team that should have won the whole thing. He was there in 18, the team that should have won the whole thing. He was there through the dark years of 12, 14, 15, 16, the reemergence of the Saints in 17. Like, if there's one player all time, Saints all time, that deserves a ring that hasn't got one, I think it's Cam. And I think all of us want to see him get another chance at it in New Orleans. I don't know if the timelines are going to match up, but it's going to hurt if it ends up being the end. It's going to suck if he ends up in Denver. To me,
yeah, it will. But I Denver and San Francisco are the two teams that I kind of feel as potential destinations for Cam Jordan, and Denver for obvious reasons. Detroit, a possibility too, up there with Dan Campbell. I don't. People have suggested Chicago from the start because Dennis Allen was his coach. Well, nope. Cam was pretty vocal about his displeasure over Dennis Allen the last couple of years. Got even more vocal after DA was fired. So I can't see that reunion. I can envision Cam returning to New Orleans long before he would sign a contract with the Chicago Bears. But I mean, we'll keep our fingers crossed. There's still hope because nobody has signed him yet. But it's literally the one thing that I'm watching on the news wires, and I'm updating every single hour, checking with my sources. Hey, if you heard anything, people checking with me. Hey, have you heard anything? My answer is no. And the answers I'm getting are no. Considering Cam is not a quiet individual, things are almost ominously quiet on the front right now.
Yeah. We'll save that. I see Calvin and John referencing Chris Jones tweeting about Cameron Jordan today. Is there an option he goes to Kansas City? That type of thing. Kansas City's going to be an interesting team.
Yeah.
Just with how long are you without Patrick Mahomes? Right.
I forgot about that.
That's going to be the interesting part of that whole situation. Running a little short on time. I do have to bounce a little early today. So, Bob, I did want to open the floor these last few minutes. 200 episodes. I don't want to just glance over that because of time restraints, but that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You go back and you think about doing this weekly, and you're looking at, if you count the weekly shows, you're looking at, that's like 4 years worth. Now, obviously, we haven't been doing this together 4 years. There's been the post game shows and this show or this, hop on just to chat. Also taking multiple weeks off, so I think everything kind of works itself out at the end of the day.
Right.
But we've been doing this together now for a long time. And I, for one, am very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for you. I'm very grateful for all of our regulars. I've shouted some of them out today. And like I said, I think it's just a special thing to not just get to a number like 200, but also be able to do it consistently with someone you enjoy working with is very important, because I've got two numbers like 200 before working for people that I don't like, or working with
Yeah.
or working with people I don't necessarily enjoy, or not feeling like I have the freedom to truly be myself through 200 podcast videos, articles, whatever the case may, broadcasts, whatever the case may be, to where in this situation I feel like I can completely be myself. You and I talk, every week, whether just beyond this or just in, whatever. But we also spend time on the phone because we do like each other. We do hang out. I mean, shoot, I'm going to be up in your area next week. And I said, hey, I don't know if I can squeeze it, but I can try. And you were like, no, like your schedule is way too tight. Like, don't even try it. And then vice versa. You have like a hour layover in Charlotte. And I was like, let's not try to squeeze that in. There's no way. But I'm super grateful for all of it. And I hope we have another 200 million episodes together, because this is something fun and something that's that I enjoy, and I'm super grateful for it.
And you know what, Brendan, I'm humbled by everything that you say, but I'm just as grateful to you. I'm glad that you feel free to be yourself, because that's exactly who I wanted to work with after getting to know you, as writing companions, doing the draft-a-thons together. I was excited about just even asking you, to be a regular co-host on a branded name like the Bayou Blitz. We've been around since 2018, and I have such a better relationship with you, than with the previous co-host that I'd asked to start it up with me. We'll give him the Voldemort treatment for this week only because we're running short on time. But yeah, I enjoy every single minute working with you. I love getting to know you over the years, hanging out with you when I come down to Charlotte or when you come up here. And we have, it feels like we have a nice flowing relationship. I'd like to think anyway that comes out when we're on the air with you guys. We take a lot of pride, Brendan and I do, in our work, and the way we work together. And a smooth flow when you have multiple hosts on a show like this is extremely important. I have learned that, that's one of the handful of things that I have learned over the years. And when we have guests on, I feel like guests enjoy talking to both of us equally. We're not tripping over each other. We're not trying to one up each other. And I'm like you. I think I have another few thousand episodes in me, and I would be honored if you and I were side by side doing them. So I thank you for everything that you have done for me personally, for the Bayou Blitz brand, and we both thank all of you guys, the fans out there, for every bit of support that you have given us.
Well said. Absolutely. Happy 200 episodes. Happy free agency. We'll be back next week to talk more signings. And at that point, maybe we have an idea of where some of these other Saints. We didn't even talk about Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor's not coming back, but we also knew that. But we'll talk about some other Saints, how the roster changes, and sooner or later we'll start getting some draft stuff. So that'll be fun, because I know that's right.
Yeah, I mean it's coming with my writings, very, very soon. I have my notes already. I just got to, start pulling it together, because we were running short on time. We couldn't talk too much about Get Checked or Check Out, this week with the cruise coming up, especially on, March 26th. And I know you got to run, Brendan. So I know we unfortunately can't talk about it tonight, but we will talk about it more in depth next week, as we always have. And folks, continue to stay tuned to my page, especially on Facebook, is where I try to promote it more often. But the Get Checked or Check Out site, the Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise coming up very, very soon, in a couple of weeks. with Courtney Roby, Tyrone Hughes, Michael Lewis, myself and my family sailing out of Jacksonville, setting sail for the Bahamas from March 26th through March 30th. But if you're a regular of the show, you guys have heard what I've said about them, about the organization, about needing your support, needing our support, and why you should go on this cruise. But like I said, I know we don't have time to give our full plug to it this evening.
That's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. Thanks so much for tuning in for another edition of the Bayou Blitz podcast. Thanks so much to our friends and our sponsors over at Get Checked or Check Out. Make sure to go ahead and check them out. Until next week, we will have more Saints for you. And until then, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. See you then. Good night.
Good night.